Four things I want to ask you about today. Obviously, starting with the Russian elections, why they happened, what it means. You know, is this going to backfire? I
like your question, why they happened. You know,
let's start there.
That's a puzzle for me as well. Why they happened?
What's purpose does this serve other than, I don't know, a PR war disinformation purpose?
The funny thing, in August, the official spokesperson for Mr. Putin, Dmitry Peskov, actually said in public when he was asked about the elections that yeah, it's a redundant, very expensive bureaucratic procedure. That was like almost exact quote what he said. So after that, he was removed from his position for 2 weeks and sent for vacations. You know, just to get back to normal, because for once he said the absolute truth.
Yes,
it's a redundant and very expensive bureaucratic procedure, but that's how Putin is a lawyer by training, so he needs this formal formalities to happen regularly to confirm that he is still within certain legal framework, and that's what he does. Also, obviously, he wanted to send a message in regards to the occupied territories, is the so-called elections that are happening inside Russia. Obviously, they're not so important, but the occupied territories, the territories of Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Donetsk and Luhansk people republics, he needed to conduct their certain procedure to say, okay, so that the current authorities, it's already not appointed by me, but they vetted by the population. It would be just one of the cards that he would play during like whatever negotiations may take place. That's the way he thinks. For me, I think it's unnecessary, because there would be no negotiations whatsoever. Plus, he is putting a lot of people at physical risk. But okay, at the end of the day, that's the way his system operates.
So when people went to vote in the occupied territories, did they get a ballot with just one name on it?
No, formally they got the same ballot with a lot of different, it's not usually names, it's usually party lists, but doesn't matter, because not so many people went to vote.
Yes.
They were just drawing the results themselves, you know,
yes.
just imagining them. So in some of the these regions, they even shut down the polling stations prematurely because nobody was coming. And in some places, like at 3 p.m., they already said, okay, enough is enough, and closed them up. So really, there's not so much to do with the actual elections. And the best numbers actually can be seen by the example of Moscow. In Moscow city, there were elections of Moscow mayor, so they needed to reconfirm Putin's mayor that he appointed quite a long time ago, Sergei Sobyanin. And the physical turnout to the polling stations was 6%. So that's the actual number. But then they said that the overall turnout would be 42.5 because all others voted online.
Yes.
And, obviously, you know, you can never verify who voted online, who didn't vote online. And in Russia, to vote online is not so easy. You know, there is such a complex government system where you need to be enrolled, and just for the purpose of verification of the votes. So I mean, it's not like you just going on the website and clicking the button. So that's why it's highly unlikely. There are 42% of votes, 6% is a more accurate figure, it seems.
Yeah, and we've had this conversation before where there's things that Putin does that are purely for the audience of Russia and the Russian people. He doesn't care what the West thinks about this. He doesn't. I'm assuming he doesn't care, and I'm assuming he doesn't care that the West knows that this is that it's a complete sham.
You know, I would say yes and no here, because I think that one of rationales that that lies underneath elections is exactly the Western audience. Because for Russians, all Russians know that we live in monarchy, and that at the end of the day, it's this guy who appoints all his minions. And in this situation, why bother with the elections and the formalities and whatever? He could have just appointed them, and there would be no difference in terms of public perception. But he actually wants to look internationally like there is such process as elections. And he even calls for different international observers, which are the deputies from different countries, which he physically pays money to verify that it was fine. And for him, again, it's very formal. He even I would say that he is not just saying this, but he genuinely believes that all democratic procedures in all countries is just a manipulation. It's just an image. Now, so, okay, so you guys in the United States, you also do this, ballot in absentia, mail ballots, like whatever, which you never can verify. I also do the same thing in Russia. You say that you have certain voting procedures with indirect voting for the president. Okay, I also do something that you can never properly check. So you say that you have proper elections, and I say that I have proper elections. And who would figure out? There is no court decision in Russia that the elections are fraud. So there is no official decision. It's your opinion that they are bad. And our opinion is they're good. So that's it. It's your word against ours, and that's it.
Wow, you've got me on that one. I never saw it through that lens, and I don't think I'm going to sleep well tonight thinking about it. So, thanks for disrupting a good night's sleep. Let's move on. Let's move on to. I don't know that most people in the West are aware of how many bombings and fires and drone attacks are occurring inside of Russia. I think if you're not following that on social media, you're not getting a sense of the scope of it. Can you talk about the scale of the attacks and who's behind them?
Yeah, the number of those attacks are growing. I would actually say that I think that the Western audience is more aware than the Russian audience, because that's what Russian authorities are trying to do. They're trying to hide them as much as possible, so they never announce formal attack alarm. They don't care. Okay, so one building would be destroyed. Some people would die, but the rest would just would sleep normally. Their sleep would not be disrupted anyhow, and they would never learn that something did happen, because there are no free media which can report on this. That's the approach. In terms of what's happening in particular, I would say several directions of activities. One line of activity is activities in the areas which are close to Russian-Ukrainian border, and they have obvious military rationale is to soften the resistance, to draw more forces away from the front lines, to get into the back lines to protect the border. So to wave the flag, to show presence, and obviously these attacks mainly they are targeted on different military facilities, military bases, etc. But also they are targeted to crucial military-related infrastructure. So different fuel tanks are under attack. Railroad stations where the cargo trains could be collected. This kind of things. So that's one thing. The second thing would be military-related, again, objects in the back of the Russian territory. And if first line of attacks usually has been done just purely by Ukrainians, because they don't need anybody else.
Yes.
The second
You
line.
mean, and when you say Ukrainians, you mean Ukrainian citizens acting independently, not Ukrainian defense.
Here I'm saying about Ukrainian military, official military. As it's kind of normal. They are sitting on Ukrainian territory, but they are sending drones, in the surrounding areas, or there could be saboteur groups,
yes.
Which are coming inside the territory and attacking particular objects. But when we're talking about the faraway stuff, it's way harder for Ukrainians to do this kind of job. And recently, FSB, Russian security forces, they significantly tightened the screws. So here is where they turn to us, the Russian partisans, the guerrilla fighters, to assist them with that. They're asking for certain things to be done. They're supplying the equipment which is necessary to do this, and then the Russian nationals who are actually doing this type of job. And the perfect example for this was a recent attack on Pskov airfield base, which is like 900 kilometers away from the Ukrainian border. It's almost next to St. Petersburg. And that's where one of Russian major airborne rangers base is, most influential and like the most capable. It's like, I don't know, Fort Bragg in the US. So it's like it's a very fortified and a very important military outpost in the country. So it was a successful attack. The whole airfield was on fire. They lost 6 airplanes there. So it was good. And then the third line of attacks are attacks that have political meaning, political dimension, so which are targeted to achieve the maximum social resonance, the resonance in the society. And these are attacks that were happening into Rublyovka. That's the area where Russian political elite lives. It's like it's a closed compound where all those riches and members of the government, members of Putin's administration, are usually buying their houses. And also there were attacks on Kremlin.
Yes.
There were attacks on so-called Moscow City. That's the area where several ministries is being dispatched. That's ministries that are related to the war, that organizing the war, and they were under attack. And as the result, one of these ministries, that's infrastructure division of Ministry of Economy, they were just sent home and said like that we will not use this office anymore because it's too dangerous.
Too dangerous because they already got bombed.
3 times.
3 times. So it's the number of attacks is escalating, but you're saying the Russian people have very low awareness of this. So it's effective for rallying the West, but it's still not breaking through that shield around the average Russian citizen.
Here is that's what people ask me many times in the West is about, like how the general population feels about this. And my answer to this is that it doesn't matter, how the ordinary Russians feel about this, because they unfortunately have no say at the moment. They cannot influence the situation at all, and they basically resign to this situation. So they themselves they are not acting. It's applicable both to the opposition-minded people and pro-government-minded people, but they all understand that nothing depends on them. And what is important is to make the impression on the elites. The elites should feel scared, and that's why the attacks on Rublevka or on Moscow City, because that's the place where no ordinary citizen are living. That's the place for the upper circles of the society. They should feel scared, and trust me, they do. They
so they
understand
have access.
that
They have access to information that your average Russian citizen doesn't. They are aware of what's going on.
Yeah, they are aware. They are aware, and I would say that their awareness sometimes is even over-exaggerated because, again, in the situation of the lack of information, there is a lot of gossip. They're talking to each other, so they kind of overinflating the danger, and that's good.
All right, so I want to build on what you just said about the average citizen not really being resigned, essentially, kind of like a dog that's been kicked every day, right? I mean, I'm just going to sit in my corner and eat my little bit of food and just, I'm not going to mess with you. You don't mess with me. That's my impression.
Yes.
Now I want to bring things really to the Congress and what's happening there. But I want to start by reading a tweet from a friend of yours, and I'm going to ask you to tell me the proper way to say his last name. Is it Khodorkovsky or Khodorkovsky?
Khodorkovsky.
Khodorkovsky. So Michael Khodorkovsky posted on Twitter a couple of days ago a long thread about, how if Putin is gone, this is why it won't make a difference if there's just another single leader or a cult personality who begins to lead Russia. And I'm going to read the last tweet in that thread and get your response, and then I want to talk more about what's going on with the Congress. The last tweet in the thread said, Russia's future should not lie in the hands of a single leader. Time after time, we have seen what that leads to. Instead of letting yet another cult of personality develop, what Russia needs is a decentralization and for power to be placed in the collective hands of a parliament. Do you have anything to say about that?
No, I do agree. That's our common vision. And yeah, we do think that it is a danger. And the danger is both on the government side and on the opposition side. On the government side, Putin can always be replaced with somebody like visually nicer, like, for example, Mikhail Mishustin. And then people may say, okay, that's it. The changes is made, mission is accomplished, and all right. So the war would be over, and we move on. But that means that the empire would be actually preserved. War criminals would never be punished. The restoration of Ukraine would never be financed, etc., etc., etc. So it's
worth reminding people that Putin was visually nicer in the beginning too.
That's also true. That's also true. So you should never trust in the personality. You should trust in the institution. Yes. And on the opposition side, the temptation is also there. Many people say, "Oh, it's a nice man, Navalny. Let him carry on." No, he is as authoritarian as all others. And even if he would be the nicest person on this planet, the temptation when such guys being put at the at the top of the huge government, the temptation to be tough and autocratic is too high. Yes. And he would inevitably convert. You need to create a very strong institutions that would counter that. And for example, in the United States, when you guys decided to have a strong presidency, that was in the already highly decentralized country where people from the very beginning was relying on themselves, and the whole culture of people coming to the States was just by nature of this immigration.
Yes.
That's no government. We don't listen to the government. Tradition in Russia is vice versa. It's even when it is the best democratic government at the top, people, they used to listen to the capital, to the leader. They used to obey the commands, and that's why even weak but unilateral leader would inevitably go stronger just by the force of tradition. So
Yes.
you need just to eliminate that position altogether, and here where we with Mikhail are totally aligned.
Mm. So one of the things that, my response to reading this long thread and getting to this last tweet about a parliament, I agreed with everything he said, but I expected one last post that talked about this group of people who are creating a parliament, a democratic parliament for Russia called the Congress of People's Deputies. And I'm just wondering, why didn't he take it a step further? He knows you're there. Why didn't he mention that there is an organization? Maybe there's others that are working towards the goals that he's describing.
I wouldn't say that there are many others. I mean, the idea of a parliamentary republic right now dominates the Russian opposition. It's mainstream, but everybody understands completely different things under that. Even Navalny recently started to say that he is pro-parliamentary republic, but with him a strong leader at the top.
Yes.
Anyway. So that's why there are a lot of different types of parliamentary republics. Even the Soviet Union formerly was a parliamentary republic. So that's why, details matter. And that's why the Congress of People's Deputies is working not with slogans, but with documents, and precisely putting together, how this parliamentary republic should be shaped, how it should look like, what are the procedures, what are the institutions, what are the checks and balances, what are the major constraints that are within the system. And obviously that's not so many people like it, because they feel that we are kind of limiting their maneuver in this regard. So there is a lot of political competition, but what can we do? With Khodorkovsky, actually, it's probably the situation is the best. At least we have very good working relations with him. But he is always saying it to me in private that, look, if I'm putting the bets openly on Congress of People's Deputies, then a lot of people whom I am working with elsewhere, they would start to get pissed off and say like, you are one group with them, and we start doing something else, and that he would lose a lot of his clout around him, and that's bad. But yeah, I do understand it, but I think at the end of the day, there is no other way. We will all get united on the platform of the Congress.
Excuse me. And it's interesting. I went to the website of the Congress this morning, and there is you have said several times here today, what's important is not the person or the personality, but the institutions. And there is a significant number of documents that have been drafted and approved and waiting for the approval of the people themselves. But, there is a new constitution that's underway. There's lots of laws, including, as you told us once here, one of the most important laws that institution must pass for Russia to move on from where it is today is a law that creates an open and free media. I mean, your group has done an incredible amount of work to achieve the goal of democracy in Russia. I'm just wondering if you can give us kind of a quick summary of where things are today.
Yeah, we are preparing for the next plenary session of the Congress that would take place in November. That's a little bit long pause since the third plenary session, which was at the end of June. But that's because of the parliamentary elections in Poland, where our main base is, and Polish governments asked us, to hold horses a little bit, because that may interfere with the election process. It's a very tight election race, and obviously the question of future of Russia is one of the critical things there. And we could get stuck inside this very, very tight race, and that would hurt the cause. But in the interim, we are planning to make a session of the committee that is working on the Peace Act and the Transition Act in Prague on 11th of October. And that will discuss the concept of demilitarization of Russia. It was in the first reading. This bill was already through the Congress, but we are preparing the second reading. And we want to collect a lot of known international scholars and policymakers in the Czech Republic, in the center of Europe, to discuss what are the options, so that they provide their feedback to our ideas, and that we can better prepare this document for the final reading in the Congress. And also in parallel, we are working on the second reading of the Municipal Reform Act, which is very important, because all our activities, we want to start from bottom up. And the municipal level is crucial. There were a lot of debates about this at the previous Congress when it was the first reading, and a lot of amendments coming in. So, this committee is working very hard on that document. And finally, on the next Congress, we will be paying a lot of attention to the economy, and we want to pass the Economy Freedom Act, which would eliminate all the unnecessary government obstacles that were created in the economy and sources of corruption. But we also would put a lot of attention on how to fight with oligarchy, how to revise the illegal privatization deals that happened in the past, and in general to restore people's trust in the economic procedures in the country.
All right, I want to ask you one last question, and that is, I forgot what it was. So
that's the best question. When you don't know the question, usually is getting the best answer.
I'm telling you, I had a zinger of a last question for you, and I completely went blank. So let's wrap it up there. Oh, I know what it was. I want to know just quickly, are you seeing a change as you're talking with business people, political leaders, other elites, as you call them, inside of Russia, when you're having conversations with people about the ideas behind the Congress and the Congress itself, are you finding a shift towards understanding why this is the best approach to taking Russia to the next phase of its development?
I would say that there are positive developments and negative developments, which are happening in parallel. The positive thing is that we are now being taken quite seriously. If people were making jokes about us in the beginning and kind of disregarding of what we are doing, right now we are being taken seriously. A lot of criminal cases inside Russia about us being the most dangerous organization of all times, and stuff like and stuff like that. So that's on the positive thing. On the negative side, the thing is that people read what literally reads New York Times, Washington Post, and others, and they think that the Ukraine would be forced to sit down and negotiate closer to the end of this year. And that makes them think that they shouldn't be engaged in any kind of opposition activities, that they should just do nothing and wait for the outcome when the big boys would actually settle down the relationship. And that's really bad, because that actually discourages people from being actually engaged in whatever regime change activities they may be involved in.
That removes any urgency. In fact, it creates complacency.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
you're right. Unfortunately.
And my sense is, from everything I've read and everyone I've talked to, that there is no way that the Ukrainian people are ever going to concede. So that's such a false hope.
It's absolute false narrative that has been dissipated here in the United States, unfortunately, by several pretty influential people, namely Bill Burns and Jake Sullivan. But it's a complete misunderstanding of what's going on there. They think they have exceptional skills in the negotiations, and that's why they will be able to bring sides to a compromise. But right now, there is no ground for the compromise. Not before one side or another would claim a significant military victory. In the situation of a stalemate, there is no compromise whatsoever. And especially right now, in the situation when the Ukrainian army is pushing forward, there is absolutely no ground for the compromise.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hate to leave it on that note, but it creates an opportunity for you and I to talk again next week. And I hope we have new and significant and good news for the cause. Thanks for talking with me again today, Ilya. It's great to see you.
Thank you very much. It's always my big pleasure. Thank you.